And hello, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday night's narrative. Better late than never. It's 7:30 on the East Coast, 4:30 on the West Coast. This is a Narrative Live special report. We're looking at January 6th, the Untold story, as has been revealed by these new subpoenas just out today and yesterday from the January 6th committee. Helping us do that, Sandy Bacon, the legendary, we've just been told, reporter who's been covering Jan 6. And really, you are a legend. And thank you very much for being with us tonight, Sandy. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And
I
Joe
needed
Dempsey's
that. I was
here.
in a bad mood. That's great.
Oh, we'll cheer you up. Don't you worry about that.
Okay,
It's
good.
a cheerful evening around here, that's for sure, especially with all the tech problems
Yeah.
we're having. Now that we've succumbed them, I feel like everything is achievable. Joe Dempsey's here as well. How are you, Joe? Nice to see you again.
Good. Thanks for having me. Nice to
Now,
see
I'm
you.
so glad that both of you are here because there's a lot to unpack. I mean, there was 5 subpoenas today that came down around 5 p.m. and then a bunch that came down yesterday. And sort of we had plans, and sometimes those plans have to be destroyed once, but today they had to be destroyed twice because of the new subpoenas that came down. And they're so important. I really want to dig into what the new ones that came out tonight.
Yeah.
And I noticed, the guys on TV don't even have pictures of some of these people. That's how much attention they've been paying to things like the First Amendment Praetorians. But we have, of course, a ton of file in them and
I
a lot of
never heard of
information.
him. I
You
never
see,
heard of
even you
him.
haven't been paying attention. You got to
Yeah,
watch
but I'm
narrative a
the
little
only
bit.
one here who knows Enrique personally.
You are the only one, and we want to hear about
Yeah.
that. Plus,
Yes.
we want to watch some of your incredible tape. You've got some exclusive tape you're going to be playing for us and sharing with us tonight. And we'll be showing you the real thread that we think is being a thread here, if you will, that there is a connection between the militants, the militia groups that were out there on January the 6th that caused a lot of the damage, that caused a lot of the insurrection, that went into the Congress, that threatened people's lives, that threatened to hang the vice president, that did all sorts of horrible things to the building, and the people who organized it, which is the Alex Jones, the Roger Stones, the Mike Flynns of the world. And those people happen to surround Donald Trump. So you can sort of see how the net is tightening, if you will, around Donald Trump, and we'll explain exactly how that all happened when we walk through all these subpoena letters and all the other information we have for you tonight. Joe, let me start with you though, because you've got this great overarching view. You've done so much investigating into the actual indictments that have happened. What is your sense of where this committee is going and why they're going there?
Well, I think first of all, Representative Raskin is a great follow. If you want to know what's going on, follow Jamie Raskin. Today he was talking about coordination between some of the more violent groups. And when I hear Raskin say something like coordination and the violent groups, he's talking about the people who got subpoenaed today, and that's the Oath Keepers and First Amendment Praetorian, those and the Proud Boys, obviously. If Representative Raskin is talking about coordination among those, what we're really talking about is conspiracy. And I think what we're looking at now with these subpoenas, we're really talking about the people who are in the know and who should be. I think it was August 25th, I think, was the first letter from, or one of the first letters from Benny Thompson, the chairman of the January 6th committee. And in that, he outlined over 80 names of people that he wanted to get information from. And I think that letter was to the records keeper at the National Archives. In that, when I started to see those names, I started to just, after name, you start seeing Robert Patrick Lewis, and you're like, oh, they know that name. Okay, good. Amy Kramer, oh, they know that name too.
Yeah,
so when I saw what was happening in terms of who they wanted information from, I knew that this committee was at least following the right dots. Now that we start to see subpoenas, it's escalated, right? So it's no longer we need information from those guys. It's we demand information from those guys. We want those documents, and we need to understand what's going on.
And what's interesting is that it's not just the subpoenas that are, they're not just us demanding letters. They're outlining what they know about each of these individuals. It's not just, give us all these documents. It's we already know all the stuff about you.
Right.
But we'd like the documents as well, and we'd like the documents as well, which I think is leading. And I don't want to cut you off there, Joe. So finish your thoughts, and then we'll move on to some of this the bigger picture stuff that we've got looking here.
Yeah, the one that I really paid attention to today was the subpoena for Robert Patrick Lewis, because in that it talks about December 12th, and it talks about the Jericho March, and that there was information that the First Amendment Praetorians were guarding Mike Flynn during the Jericho March. But December 12th wasn't just the Jericho March. There was a Proud Boys March as well in December in DC in December 12th. So the other part of that is the So much happened on December 12th in that, because there's video of Alex Jones going up to Mike Flynn
We're
and
going to do all of
saying,
that.
you know,
We've
are
got
you
all of that coming
scared?
up
There's all
later.
kinds,
So
yeah, there's all kinds
save
of
that,
stuff.
because that's going to come in a bit. I don't want to interrupt you, but we're going to build to that because we've got all this great video that Sandy was able to get to us. And of course, Sandy, this is a big thing of your big theory, is that this was not just one day. We now know it wasn't one day. We now know there was a lot of planning that led up to that day. But we also know that there were other events that were rehearsal events, planning events, meetings, all sorts of things led up in the weeks leading up to January the 6th. And that has been something that you've been pushing all along. So tell us a little bit about why you think that's so important.
Well, I did. I was doing some work for Now This News at the time, and I would go and shoot these things and give them my SD cards, and then they would make these remarkable stories out of them. And they did 3 of them, and the first one was on November 14th. Now, November 14th was the first. I think it was called March for Trump. Joe, was it? It was either March for Trump
or the Million MAGA March.
Million MAGA. I think you're right. Yeah. March for Trump was like maybe the second one, but the first one, I think you're right. Million MAGA March. So we went to that, and let me back up, because something I learned after I got back and I started to do my timeline and stuff. On November 9th, after Trump had lost the election, he fires all the bigwigs in the Pentagon. And he puts in this guy, Chris Miller, and maybe Flynn's brother, Joe Flynn, and Kash Patel, and all these. And everybody's going, what the hell's he doing that for? He lost, right? It's got to be bad, but we didn't know how bad. And my theory is that in Washington, D.C., because it's not a state, the National Guard is subordinate only to the President of the United States and then to the Secretary of Defense, right? So that was the only way they pulled it off, was they had placed all these requests for the National Guard on January 6th and nobody showed up, right? I mean, as you were watching this at home, didn't you kind of wonder where the cops were? I mean, did anybody occur to anybody? I've been asking people now recently.
I mean, I certainly, watching it at home, I thought that they obviously had told them to stand down, because that's what they were doing. They were not involved in any stopping, and that's why on that day, by 3:00, I was saying, we should be impeaching this man again. And that started off with a long 10-month investigation here on Narrative that you guys have been involved in, and many others have been involved in, as we've been unpacking every aspect of what happened on January the 6th. And gladly, I'm happy to say that everything that we have been reporting is turning out to be at least reflected in these subpoenas that have come out from the January 6th committee, which is cool, isn't it? It is cool. And kudos to everybody involved in this project, because everyone from the viewers here who are part of the the fact check team on the show, and also give us a lot of the leads, to the many researchers and people that like Ann Nelson and others that we speak to on a regular basis, who've provided so much detailed information to us that we've been able to piece together a pretty reliable look at how this whole thing turned out. I want to play some tape.
Can I back up? Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, you're going to play something? I'm sorry, I got sidetracked with the Pentagon thing. But so like 9, 10, 11, 12, 34. So like 5 days after that, there was this Million MAGA March, whatever it was called. And we went down there, and there were a lot of MAGAs there with their flags. I mean, thousands of them. I don't know what the final estimate was. And they were marching with these signs that said, "Stop the Steal." And Nick Fuentes was there with his gripers, and they were yelling, "Christ is King." And all of the people that spoke at these meetings, I missed the Jericho March, damn. All the people that spoke at all 3 of the Stop the Steal rallies, January 6th being the 3rd, were all the same people. There was Flynn and Stone and Roger, Alex Jones, and Nick Fuentes, and the woman Kramer. All of them were the same people. And the keynote speakers on January 5th were all the people that Trump pardoned.
Right. Interesting. So that's a big point.
Papadopoulos, Flynn. This was the bringing it home, right? January 5th was, nobody's talking about that. That was the 2 speeches that I shot Roger Stone and Alex Jones, and they were calling for a holy war, lots of Jesus talk, right? Like the Crusades.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Like
we're going to get this. So hold that thought because we're building up to that. I want to start off back down to the first time we figured out that this was a much bigger plan than just these people who showed up at January 6th. There were clear signs that the rest of the GOP was involved in facilitating something called Stop the Steal. They were actively encouraging people on Fox News, on AON, and various other what is it? American OAN, sorry, OAN and Newsmax and other places. They were actively pursuing this idea of imposing martial law and actively pursuing this idea of having these new elections called in these states where they could question the results. So on February the 8th, I put together this little video. I'm going to play it now because it helps set up where we are today, explaining how those events on TV were adding up to something pretty scary, and that the pardons, as you just mentioned, were really important. The Roger Stone, Michael Flynn pardons, and Steve Bannon pardons all played a role in allowing January the 6th to happen, because without those guys free, you would never have had January the 6th happen. So here's a little video that we put out on February explaining the big theory of January the 6th.
I don't want to overplay the facts here, but if someone will study the president's authority in the Insurrection Act and in his ability to impose martial law.
President Trump won this election, so everyone who's listening, do not be quiet. Do not be silent about this. We cannot allow this to happen before our very eyes.
Philadelphia elections are crooked as a snake.
That every time they close the doors and shut out the lights, they always find more Democratic votes.
People out there talking about martial law, it's like it's something that we've never done. Martial law has been instituted 64 times.
And we're working closely with Congressman Mo Brooks, closely with Congressman Andy Biggs, Congressman, obviously, Paul Gosar, my great friend.
We have to go all the way, and that's what's happening. And you watch what happens over the next couple of weeks. You watch what's going to come out. Watch what's going to be revealed.
In the next couple of days, I think we're going to see some extraordinary historical moments. The truth is going to come out. Donald Trump will continue to be the president of the United States.
As I told them 20 years ago, I tell them again, I don't know how this is going to end, but if they want to fight, they better believe they've got one.
Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners.
An actual fighter. Kimberly.
Yes, have the courage to do the right thing. Fight.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you very much. So hopefully we have this today, right?
We shall see.
So that's the video that's, we put out February the 8th, I think, and it gives you a good sense of even back then. You could see what was happening. You could see that you had the president of the United States agreeing with, participating, saying that he will be there, talking about fighting, and also people like Ali Alexander saying they're getting orders from POTUS. It's certainly all the congressmen that we've been talking about in the last few days, including Paul Gosar, just recently censured. We know now what he did, and we know now how involved he was on that day. But earlier on, then, we had Ali Alexander, who no one had even heard of, describing all these congressmen working closely with him. How important is that information as we're now looking at who's responsible for January the 6th? And then you've got these tweets from Lauren Boebert telling people where the Speaker of the House was in the middle of an insurrection, also very suspicious tweets. You've got Kevin McCarthy, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, all pushing for a recount or a redo of the elections on Fox News. So you've got this machine that was launched right after the elections, at least towards probably December, to really move the electorate into believing that the election was stolen. And
can I
go ahead.
Say something? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's important. On December 12th, video that I did, a QAnon woman, I was up by the Washington Memorial and Monument, whatever it's called, and she says verbatim what Flynn just said.
Oh, yeah?
In your video. He said, General Flynn said that President Trump needs to call martial law, and we need to have, and the election was stolen, as we know, and this is the 12th of December, and we need to have a new election overseen by the military.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, or you could move to Venezuela.
Well, the truth is, that's what they were planning to do. I mean, this was the plan, and there's no other way to look at it.
But the QAnon, the disinformation, what fascinates me, because I've interviewed so many MAGAs and QAnons, is that they spit out verbatim what the talking points that Flynn is, because I think Flynn is one of the Qs anyway, but they'll drop the information, and then these people sop it up and regurgitate it.
Absolutely.
And they do it verbatim what these guys
they're very
saying.
well trained, apparently. Apparently they've learned that they have to listen, and it's a very loyal bunch. I mean, I got to say that they hold ranks pretty closely together.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the first instance I could find of these Stop the Steal kind of arrangements being discussed was Roger Stone on Alex Jones's radio show on InfoWars. That first clip you heard in that piece there was them talking about in the Insurrection Act, and it was all being plotted and discussed live on the air on InfoWars.
Insurrection Act,
yeah. I mean, this was done in plain sight by everybody. The end theory, this is the chart that I've referred to many, many times, and someone's gone through some iterations. But at the end of the day, we had Roger Stone, who basically raised the militia, who helped at least start up the Proud Boys and others like it, who has worked with the Oath Keepers, whose ties are with all these organizations, including the First Praetorians. You got Alex Jones, who I called the Ministry of Propaganda, through basically InfoWars was able to educate and lie to an entire half a nation about what they should be doing and how they should be getting ready for January the 6th. Michael Flynn, who really is the QAnon guy, but also now it emerges the president in waiting, it seems, maybe even for the insurrection once it happens. And then you've got Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, who are there to set the lie. And now I don't believe Rudy's been handed a subpoena yet. Has he? I don't think he has.
No, they're going to they're going to come in, and he's going to just go to to trial.
Sidney Powell's name comes up a fair amount, and you were able to dig up today a really interesting thing, Joe, from RPL. And people don't know who RPL is, so maybe we should back up and say that there were three big letters that went out today to three different militia type groups. One was the Proud Boys, one was the Oath Keepers, and one was the First Amendment Praetorians that is led by a guy named Robert Patrick Lewis. And why don't we take it slowly and go through each of these individually? Let's start off with the Proud Boys. You know them really well, Sandy. You know the leadership of the Proud Boys. You followed them around. It's certainly not
I
the
put
first
two
time
of them in jail.
You put two of them in jail? How did that happen?
Yeah. Didn't you know that?
I didn't know that.
That's
Tell us
why
how
they
that
hate
happened.
me so much. Yeah, well, I just happened to be at the Republican Club a couple of years ago when Gavin McGinnis was going to be speaking there. And, I got into all this in Charlottesville. I knew nothing about white supremacy or the Proud Boys or anything. I got the only video of Enrique in Charlottesville when he said he wasn't there. I got a video of him before I knew who he was. And the Proud Boys all went to this club, the Republican Club, and they filed in and they filed out, and we followed them. It wasn't just me. And they had a big fight, a street brawl. And Cy Vance decided that he was going to prosecute them. And he really went after them. And there was no victim. There was a fight between the Antifa, counter-protesters, whoever they were. And it was a vicious brawl. And I got the video. I got the, the video.
Well done.
Yeah.
So tell us about Enrique Tarrio. He was not actually there on January the 6th. He was under arrest again. This time he was under arrest.
Really
he was under arrest
me.
for basically burning a Black Lives Matter banner, right? And so he was not allowed on that day to be at the Capitol on January the 6th.
Yeah, but on December 12th,
There were two magazines as well. He had brought two weapon magazines.
Oh, magazines. Yeah, high capacity. Yeah, it was a weird bust.
That was part of that arrest as well on the 4th.
Yeah, but it was a weird bust. I was always suspicious of it because of what I witnessed on December 12th, how he held dominion over these guys. There was thousands of them. We've never seen so many in one place as on December 12th. And it was a very violent night. There were 4 stabbings involving Proud Boys that night. And a friend of mine, photographer friend, got one of them. And he didn't even see the knife till he looked at the pictures afterwards. And the guy's holding a knife. But Enrique would, they would, wander around the city, and they would go up to the Washington Monument and, fuck Antifa and, fuck Joe Biden. And then they would kneel and they would pray. And I likened it to that scene in Glory, where they're going off to battle and they're clapping and they're saying spirituals and stuff. And they were praying like they were going to go to battle. And a couple of them would wander off and he would snap them back. I'd never seen anything like him. He was like a kindergarten teacher. And they would go off and he would bring them back in. And he was in charge of them. So that arrest, it seemed like it was always suspicious to me. I think in retrospect, and I thought so at the time, that they took him out of commission.
Yeah, they must have taken. They probably had to do it.
Because he was always Roger Stone's security, and all of a sudden, the Oath Keepers show up.
Interesting. So the Proud Boys were not supported. Were not protecting him.
They were not. No, they always, everywhere they went, he's Roger's guy.
So Tarrio gets, even though he wasn't there on January the 6th, even he wasn't there in the Capitol, he got his own little subpoena letter today from the committee, which was interesting to me. I couldn't believe that that's actually, you could even do that to someone who wasn't there. And the reasoning that they're saying that they did that was because on January the 4th, they say you were arrested for the December 12th, 2020 burning of a Black Lives Matter banner, as you just described, and barred from entering the District of Columbia on the following days. Though you were prevented from participating in the events at the United States Capitol on January the 6th. To date, at least 34 individuals affiliated with the Proud Boys have been indicted by the Department of Justice in relation to the attack of the United States Capitol. Certain indictments returned against Proud Boys members describe prior planning and coordination, including efforts to fundraise for protective gear and communications. Furthermore, video evidence plainly demonstrates that the Proud Boy members are involved in the January the 6th attack. So again, you're seeing the buildup of a plan of coordination. This is what they're doing. They're building a conspiracy. In fact, it was a conspiracy. They're revealing a conspiracy in these subpoena letters. And it's so significant that they're doing it in these subpoena letters. They obviously don't expect too much of this to come out in any public hearings or these guys showing up with any confessions. But that is what they're doing, and that's why these subpoenas are so significant that we're seeing them today. There was another letter for the Proud Boys, and Joe, I don't know if you know very much about this because it was new to me. It was not to anyone unless it's a pseudonym. Maybe it's a pseudonym. Do you know who this guy is that was named here? It's Mr. Van Dyke. Is that?
Oh, that's their lawyer.
That's the lawyer, yeah.
Jason Van Dyke. Yeah. He threatened to sue me, the bastard.
Well,
he threatened to sue me. Now
you have two connections to the today's subpoenas because it's kind of fascinating that this has come out.
Their lawyer.
There has not been a place you could actually find the Proud Boys up until now. They've existed as an entity, but not really as a legal entity. So they've discovered this legal entity.
Yeah.
But there's been no one to sue, put it that way. There's no one, if you and I wanted to sue the Proud Boys, we couldn't do it.
That guy, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That guy, Nordine, that letter you have, I haven't seen the letter. Just before, I was at the Ellipse at like 9:30 in the morning, and at about 10:15, the Proud Boys come up. Nordine's one of them, and Pizzola is there, and all of the guys that were in the first breach of the Capitol show up. Not just as Proud Boy. I knew them because, they go roo-roo. And they were wearing orange hats and the Nordine and Joe Biggs and all the guys that were. So it was a kind of a small group, maybe 30 of them. And then they started marching towards the Capitol and I followed them. But I wanted to get back to the Ellipse because I wanted to hear Trump speak at 11, but he was an hour late, deliberately. He gave them cover. Yeah.
Let's get back to that in a second because I just want to read these two things that have been mentioned here by the committee in this Proud Boys International document. So basically they're saying that he is the only Mr. Van Dyke here. Let me pull this up for you guys so you can read it along.
He's it, right? He's horrible.
Mr. Van Dyke, where are we here? We just lost that page. Here we go. So it says here that the investigation of public records has revealed credible evidence of the involvement of the Proud Boys in the events within the scope of the Select Committee's inquiry. You have been identified as in reporting as the Proud Boys attorney. You also reportedly served as chairman of the Proud Boys in 2018. You've been identified in reporting as the former owner of the Proud Boys trademark, which you surrendered in February 2021. Yes. JLVD Holdings, LLC, which corresponds to your initials, is listed as the last director of Proud Boys International, LLC, before its dissolution on February 10th, 2021. As you appear to be the last record holder of Proud Boys International, the Select Committee seeks relevant records in your possession. And it goes on to say that Mr. Indictments returned of a federal jury of in Washington, D.C. indicate that Proud Boys engaged in extensive calls for violence leading up to January the 6th, 2021. On November the 5th, 2020, Joe Biggs, a Proud Boys member indicted by the Department of Justice, posted on social media, "It's time for fucking war if they steal this shit," referring to the 2020 election results. Mr. Biggs also claims on a Proud Boy live stream show called The War Boys that government officials are evil scum and they all deserve to die a traitor's death. Ethan Nordine, a Proud Boys official, leader, also indicted by the DOJ, responded, "Yep, day of the rope," referring to the day of mass lynching of race traitors in the white supremacist novel, The Turner Diaries. Shortly before January the 6th, Mr. Nordine said on his podcast, "When police officers or government officials are breaking the law, what are we supposed to do as the people? Discourse? What are we supposed to debate? No, you have to use force." So this is quite something.
They have everything.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
They've got it all.
There's so much in there. I mean, first, the lawyer, he's no longer a Proud Boy or was kicked out of the Proud Boys in some manner because of the dispute over the trademark of the Proud Boys. But also what he did was he kind of doxed all of the elders or whatever, the leadership of the Proud Boys. He had given he had released their information and sort of doxed them, but also sent out the bylaws of what the Proud Boys were. So you could see in this bylaw document sort of, the different levels of Proud Boy. You could become like a 4th level Proud Boy or an elder, and depending on what you did. So if you got into a fight with Antifa and you've
hand-to-hand, that was the 4th
you
level,
would be recognized as a leveling up within the Proud Boys. So there's so much within that. The other part that's really, striking to me, and it just really strikes a nerve with me, is the day of the rope, the lynchings, the gallows that was set up on January 6th. And the thing that bothers me so much about Rand Paul, and there's so much to bother somebody about Rand Paul, was the fact that he voted against the Emmett Till bill that would have made lynching a federal crime. So had they succeeded in lynching Mike Pence that day, it wouldn't have been a federal crime.
Wow.
Which, Rand Paul was the reason for that.
So that's going to be really interesting. We'll get to the Oath Keepers in a bit because they're the second group that we really need to discuss. But before we do that, you mentioned this videotape, and let me see if I can find it here. I thought I had it queued up, but let me, Sandy, I was going to ask you to walk us through that incredible tape you have of the morning of January the 6th when you were with the Proud Boys. You'd been describing it to us just a few seconds ago. I thought I had it queued up, but I might have misspoken there.
It's on Vimeo.
Yeah, I can't just go to Vimeo, unfortunately, and pull it off there as much as I'd like to. Not live during the show, but I can do it if we take a little break here and then come back in a second. So I'll tell you what, we'll do that. I thought I had it ready to go, but apparently not. So let's do that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting tape because they're all there.
All the same people that we've just been describing. Are there, and we'll be able to go through it really slowly and take a look at what it's like, what the mood was like on January the 6th on that morning as they were beginning to prepare for, truly a historic day in American history. We'll be right back after this.
Hey friends, thank you for supporting Narrative and our sponsors. What's easier than opening a can of cranberry sauce? Getting free life insurance quotes with Policy Genius, of course. If you're looking for something to do while the family is running a turkey trot, you can be just as productive by comparing quotes from top life insurers with Policy Genius. Why Policy Genius? Well, Policy Genius makes it easy to compare quotes from over a dozen top insurers all in one place. And why compare? Well, you could save 50% or more on life insurance by comparing quotes with Policy Genius. You could save $1,300 or more per year on life insurance by using Policy Genius to compare policies. The licensed experts at Policy Genius work for you, not the insurance companies, so you can trust them to help you navigate every step of the shopping and buying process. That kind of service has earned Policy Genius thousands of 5-star reviews across Trustpilot and Google, and eligible applicants can get covered in as little as a week thanks to an award-winning policy option that swaps the standard medical exam requirement for a simple phone call. This exclusive policy was recently rated #1 by Forbes Advisor, higher than options from Ladder, Ethos, and Bestow. This is how it works. Getting started is really easy. First, you head to policygenius.com. In a minute, you can work out how much life insurance coverage you need, and from there, you can compare personalized quotes to find out your best price. It's as simple as that. When you're ready to apply, the Policy Genius team will handle the paperwork and scheduling, all for free. Head to policygenius.com to get started right now. Policy Genius. When it comes to insurance, it's nice to get it right. And welcome back. I don't have that tape. I can't get access to it right now, so we'll get to watch it a little later on. But let's move on to discuss the other groups of subpoenas that came out today. And I think the best place to go to next is the Oath Keepers. Now, the Oath Keepers are an interesting group. I mean, they have at their core Stuart Rhodes is their leader. Stuart Rhodes is a guy who's very well educated, comes from an Ivy School education, was a Rhodes Scholar, if I'm not mistaken. Also worked for Ron Paul in his past. So he comes from, as you just mentioned, Rand Paul. Ron's his father, so it's interesting that the name Ron Paul comes up in that. Joe, why don't you tell us a little about who the Oath Keepers are and why they are so significant to the January the 6th investigation?
Earlier on in the show, we were talking about the Insurrection Act. Stuart Rhodes has been talking about the Insurrection Act since about 2009. Mm-hmm. He's been talking about this since he started the Oath Keepers. It is an interesting group. We've talked about some of the things that they've done after Hurricane Katrina. They went down and sort of working with people, trying to help them and do some of those things. But they also were out on the Bundy Ranch, and they were also out there, just really being out on the Bundy Ranch and combating against the FBI and sort of getting them out of there and doing the things that they did seem to be stepping stones to what's happening now. It seems like everything that they've done in the past seems to have been building towards this moment. Another thing that happened when they were out on the Bundy Ranch was Stuart Rhodes did a speech for, I believe it was Ammon Bundy, in support of him, and had on the stage with him a guy named Sheriff Richard Mack, and he is the leader of the CSPOA. I believe it's the Constitutional Sheriffs Police Officers Association. Mm-hmm. So all the sheriffs and some of the things that are happening within the sheriff community, who are talking about let's get voting machines. I believe Dar Leaf was a person in Michigan, if you recall, during the issues with Gretchen Whitmer, their governor. That was a constitutional sheriff, so he came from conversations that emanated from Oath Keepers.
Wow. That's really interesting. That the constitutional sheriff stuff, which is a big issue still, but for the last few years, these sheriffs have been acting as sort of laws unto themselves, especially when it comes to illegal immigrants across the country. And it's interesting that it all ties back to the Oath Keepers, and of course, the Rand and Ron Paul situation, as we just described, is an interesting one. So Mr. Rhodes got his own subpoenas today, subpoena letter today. That's not really a surprise because so many of the people around Roger Stone on January the 6th that we've been able to track, so many of the people guarding him on January the 5th and January the 6th were in fact Oath Keepers. And we'll go through those names in just a second. But let's show you what Mr. Rhodes is accused of here in these subpoenas, or at least what they say is contained in he has information about. There are two letters, actually. One goes directly out to the Oath Keepers in general, and that's this one here. Let me just pull it up for you. So this is just addressed to the Oath Keepers, and it says the Select Committee investigation has obtained credible evidence of the involvement of the Oath Keepers in the events within the scope of the Select Committee's inquiry. The Oath Keepers is an entity incorporated in Nevada, and records indicate that Stuart Rhodes serves as the president. An indictment returned by federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. describes a conspiracy among at least 18 Oath Keepers, in which members of the Oath Keepers plan to move together in coordination and with regular communication to storm the United States Capitol on January the 6th, 2021, including by traveling to Washington, D.C. with paramilitary gear and supplies, including firearms, tactical vests with plates, helmets, and radio equipment on October 6, 2021. Another Oath Keeper was charged separately from this conspiracy. But this is really critical. What we're talking about here is that column of people that, I think we may have identified on narrative first. I think we did. It was Joe, I think your reporting that was able to help us solidify that. This was a column of people that not only left the Donald Trump rally together and was very much a military formation, but also was then later inside the Capitol. Spotted here, you can see some of them in this little court release document photo. There's all the circles basically are Oath Keepers. So these guys are dressed for battle, and inside the Capitol they are dressed and had been planning. And again, those words, coordination, again, those words, communication, those are the things that they're looking at here. They're looking at the connective tissue that makes this a conspiracy.
That was
Can
the
I say
stat.
something?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, the stat, right. I just posted an article from the Washington Post about the communications between the Oath Keepers. They had their texts and stuff a few months ago. When I did my timeline, I took all the reporting that was out there, and there was one thing happened at 1:50 between the Oath Keepers. There was a flurry of texts and conversations. There was a 6.5 minute phone call with this person, number 10, and people at the time thought that was Roger Stone. So that might be something to look at, that article.
That's who we identified on the show. We know who person 10 is. That's
Is it Stone?
That's Michael Simmons.
Simmons. Okay.
Oh, it's
That's
not
right.
Stone. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's not.
And that's a very interesting story. The Michael Simmons is a really interesting story. Well, someone should go back and look at those tapes. It was good. It was a good show. So it's not Roger Stone, but Stuart Rhodes is number one.
But
is
at 1:50, there was this flurry of communication. There was the golf cart thing incident. So I stole the golf cart and they, whatever. But at 2:11 was the first breach of the Capitol. So it was like to me, it looked like they were getting ready to, because the Capitol breach took 19 minutes. All four sides in an impenetrable building, 2:11 to 2:30.
Well, that's what happens when you've planned a military operation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think these numbers are still somewhat accurate, although they may have changed, but these have come from your timeline, I think, Sandy.
Exactly.
And you see there, it says here 2:30, but it probably was, maybe it wasn't then at the...
2:11 was he broke that window. And all of those windows that were broken, they were unreinforced windows. How did that happen? Did you know that?
I didn't. We read about it recently. I think the Washington Post did a story about it recently. That the windows were opened somehow, or easy to open.
Yeah, they weren't reinforced. There was they found the windows that weren't reinforced.
Unbelievable information that we've been finding out from so many great sources, and including you two. So, Stuart Rhodes, the indictment continues here, and it's probably the subpoena continues here. I won't go through the second part of the Oath Keeper subpoena because it's quite long. So we'll just jump here to Stuart Rhodes. And in this particular subpoena, this is the stuff that's directly attributable to him. It says the Select Committee investigation and public reports have revealed credible evidence. Yada, yada. We've heard that before. The Oath Keepers is an entity incorporated. Wait, these are the same. No, it's very similar wording, actually, than the one I just read you. So I'll just go to the second part here. On election day, you declared that an honest election could only result in a win for Donald Trump, called for Oath Keepers to operate as undercover poll watchers, and encouraged members to stock up on ammo and prepare for a full-on war in the streets. On November 10th, 2020, days after the presidential election, you encouraged Oath Keepers to gather for the November 14th, 20 million MAGA march in Washington, D.C., stating, our override DC's ridiculous anti-gun laws. Oh, sorry. Our men will be standing by awaiting the president's orders to call us up as the militia, which would override DC's ridiculous anti-gun laws. Sorry. That's what they were trying to get at there. Oath Keepers will have will have some of the most skilled special warfare veterans standing by, armed just outside DC. I mean, that's pretty spectacular that he's saying that. That same post sought to encourage attendance by recalling when Serbians overthrew their own government under a header titled, "What We the People Must Do." You quoted a patriot from Serbia, Millions gathered in our capital. There were no barriers strong enough to stop them, nor the police determined enough to stop them. Police and military aligned with the people after a few hours of fistfight. We stormed the parliament and burned down fake state television. We won.
Fake news.
Yeah. Wow. So that was their plan. That was the
Zev, I did a thread called. It starts off and it says Proud Boys times Oath Keepers multiplied by 3% equals the formula for insurrection. Because they are all together in this. And the thing about Stuart Rhodes, he was named in the indictment. So there is a conspiracy indictment already against a number of Oath Keepers, like you said. So far we've identified about 10 people from the stack, or however many people are in the stack. So we have their names. We have some people who have pled guilty from those. But in the first sort of indictments, or in some of the first legal documents that we see, Stuart Rhodes was named and then redacted. So you could see Stuart Rhodes' name, and then you can go later into a superseding indictment and then see the name person 1, where Stuart Rhodes used to be. So when I started to see what was happening in those conspiracy indictments, person 1 speaking to person 10, just as you said, Sandy, about the amount of communications that were going back, and then looking at your film and in terms of the time, and then watching some of the live feeds from some of the news outlets. When you put the timeline against those conversations, it really does start to tell a picture, which is why it was so important for us to try and understand who person 10 is.
Yeah.
The other thing
How'd you figure that out? How'd you figure that out?
It was a long process. We looked at a number of videos of Oath Keepers doing patrols in Kentucky. So there was some other further unrest that was happening in Louisville. The Oath Keepers went down to guard a gas station, and we ended up finding the person that is
actually that all ties to Carl Rittenhouse. I mean, that was sort of the same kind of action that we're doing around.
Same action.
Yeah. So there is connective tissue with all of this news that's been going on the last few days.
They were in Charlottesville too.
Yeah, they were. They were all those places.
They were and the militia who helped me, the 3%ers, were also that helped me when I fell there. They were also at the Bundy Ranch. They were Bundy guys. So they're all connected with the.
By the way,
the other survivalists.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the other things that you mentioned from the subpoena was guns and the gun laws within DC. Don't forget, there was a QRF, right? So that was Stuart Rhodes, Oath Keepers Quick Reaction Force.
Right.
And there was a person who was there in the indictments that was named to be part of that Quick Reaction Force, where they were storing guns in a hotel, and I think it was Ballston, Arlington, the Ballston Inn in Arlington. Person 3 is an important person for us to identify, because that was the person who was listed in the indictments as the person who would be the QRF force. Stuart Rhodes has later gone on to sort of distance whoever that person is, because they said, it's this sort of, this old guy who was, broken down and he couldn't, really do anything. He had all the guns, and everybody who was coming to DC was storing their guns with him, to the point where you can even see in the indictment where people are texting back and forth, hey, I need to come get my shit, after on January 7th.
That quick reaction force is really important. I mean, it's important for everyone to realize that they were staging for war. They were planning what to do after they were able to seize the Capitol, after they were able to take some of the congressmen and senators hostage, maybe after they were able to get Pence or Pelosi, or whatever it is they were trying to do. They were planning to then have a quick reaction force ready to go to respond to whatever the military might have done or anybody else might have done to try and quell the insurrection as it had taken place up to then. So this was a very planned out stage thing. They had the 4-stage maneuver to get into the Capitol within 20 minutes, as you point out, Sandy. And then the actual plan for what will happen inside, and then a plan for what would happen after that when the military or other people would have moved in.
Yeah, and after the shooting is when things really start to take off. There's more text messages and more phone calls that occur after the shooting of Ashley Babbitt.
Ashley Babbitt, which of course changed the dynamics of the whole day.
It changed the dynamics of everything.
That death really was what
244.
Yeah, changed everything that day.
So after that, you start to see the Oath Keepers gather outside the Capitol. I think at some point there's a text that says, "Hey, kind of rally on me," sort of thing from person one, which is Stuart Rhodes. But what's interesting is you see in the indictment I think they're in the 5th superseding indictment right now. There's about 18 or so, like person 18 or person 20 even, that they're up to, but only a few have been named. If you look at where Stuart Rhodes is, you can see everybody who was in the stack. So they're all rallied on him after the fact. And then there are others that are unidentified right now. I suspect that those others that are in that photo or in those pictures will be the people who will be named in further superseding indictments, which I'm hoping come soon.
Really interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Oath Keepers. By the way, everyone's got this poll up on their screen. I hope you have. If you don't have it, it means you're not watching on the narrative.org/TV feed. Currently free for everybody. It will end up being a feature just for patrons. But while it's free for everybody, go and check it out because you can do all this incredible stuff. You can chat with us. We'll take messages and put them on the air as we head towards the end of the show here as well. But you can also poll people. And this is the question we're asking you tonight. Will Donald Trump be held accountable for January the 6th? So far, 35% of people say yes, and he'll serve time. 40% say yes, but he won't serve time. And 25% no, he'll win. He'll never be held to account. I tend to agree with the way things are flowing. I find it very hard to see him serving time, but I certainly would love to see him being held to account for all the information that we've been able to dig up, but also the information the commission must have. So head over to narrative.org/TV to get your vote in there. And also tell us in the comments about what you think about today's subpoenas in particular and what it means as we head into the commission's final attempts here to get people to provide them with documents. The Oath Keepers are, just before we leave them, very important because they were also the security for Roger Stone that whole weekend. And we did a show with Noel Castler. Joe, you and I did this with which is quite detailed, looking into all these Oath Keepers and what they were doing around Roger. All these guys in these.
My friend's picture.
Is it your friend's picture? Well, it's a great picture because it reveals. Thank you, Mark, for letting us use this. It reveals these caps. Each of these caps has the Oath Keepers logo on them, and it also, even though they might seem hard to identify, the internet was a very wise thing and was able to identify all these characters at different times surrounding Roger Stone, and perhaps most notably on the morning of January the 6th, Roger Stone was at the now famous Willard Hotel, a name you probably only heard on Narrative before it now became quite popular and quite famous. But we did expose Narrative to you first. The Willard to you first. There's tape of Roger Stone outside the Willard Hotel, and we're going to play a little bit of this now. And you know this tape quite well, Joe, but feel free to jump in as well, Sandy.
Sure.
And we watch what he did that morning. And around him, you can see all the Oath Keepers.
How is this lady's picture?
Thank you so much.
So you see the guys with the, I guess it's like a scarf around their neck.
What should I ask Mr. Roger Stone?
God bless you.
Get in a golf cart.
So that's Robert Menudo.
Robert Menudo is another Oath Keeper.
He was person 5.
Appreciate you. Thank you very much. So hopefully we have this today, right?
We shall see.
We shall see. We're hoping so.
This is my Jewish brother.
Excellent.
Dr. Roger Stone.
How are you?
Forward to you.
Excellent. You know I'm a Zionist, right?
A Zionist?
I think it's really interesting that he says that, actually.
I wish somebody gave me the tip for this. I'm so jealous.
You look good too. God bless you. God bless you.
Better in person, right?
Oh, absolutely. I see you too. You look healthy.
It's just also brazen.
God bless you.
Do you know what Nick Fuentes told me last week?
What did he tell you?
This is incredible. Two things have happened in New York that are terrifying. The Groypers, Nick Fuentes, did a rally in Staten Island outside, because the anti-vax movement, right? You know this, Joe. It's all of the white supremacists have morphed into the anti-vax movement, the anti-mandate, And Nick Fuentes was at Staten Island Hospital protesting, and then he showed up at Gracie Mansion with the Groypers chanting Christ is King and America First, right? So I interviewed Fuentes, and he said, I said, you blocked me the day before you were suspended from Twitter. And so he has no platform. He says 75 million of us voted for Trump, and we're not going anywhere. And that was so terrifying.
True. So far they haven't budged, and it's fascinating to me they haven't budged. But we will do our best to nudge them along to the truth, because they really are following these kind of crazy ideas beyond rational thought, you'd think. It's interesting, just on the Oath Keepers, just to wrap up the Oath Keepers and to wrap up their connections to Ron and Rand Paul. The interesting thing about Ron and Rand Paul is their fondness, shall I say, of Putin and Russia in general. Ron Paul was a regular in Russia, often visited Moscow, reminded people that the MSM wants us to cast Russia as an enemy, and it's wrong, said Ron Paul on Russia Today way back when. His son, Rand Paul, also very, very fond of traveling to the Kremlin. In one point, traveling to deliver a letter to Vladimir Putin from Donald Trump, because that's what one does when you're a sitting senator. It certainly raises questions about who the Oath Keepers really are, where's the money coming from, and what agenda are they really following.
The libertarian ideology is all over there. I mean, it just is. We are seeing the blooming of the libertarian ideology into fascism.
Really, we are. It's pretty scary that they've
real-time
people.
Fascism.
Yeah, they've convinced people that it's the way to go.
Yeah.
So let's do the big news today, which was the RPL, and then we'll probably wrap up for today and continue if we can tomorrow, because we're going to run out of time. But the First Amendment Praetorians are not something that's sort of on everyone's lips in America right now. People have not heard of the First Amendment Praetorians. Narrative viewers have heard of the First Amendment Praetorians because we were able to identify them as a real force within the insurrectionist movement, because they took members of the Oath Keepers were part of their world. They seemed to be surrounding some of the influential leaders. And they were also present at the Willard in particular, because the tape we just showed you outside the Willard, it showed Roger Stone. Later in that tape, you saw Rudy Giuliani exiting from the Willard. And there were many, many other very powerful people in the right-wing world, all at the Willard Hotel, right across the road from the White House. Easy access for anyone who wanted to get across from the White House to come and join in. It's interesting that the First Amendment Praetorian were there.
If you recall, there was a photo of Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman from the Eastman Memo, Christina Bobb from OAN, and Philip Lulsdorf.
Philip von Lulsdorf, yeah.
He was the First Amendment Praetorian.
Indeed.
One of their business directors.
Absolutely. It's a really fascinating organization, and we'll go into them in just a second after we look at today's subpoenas. Drawing our line in the sand was what he described. Robert Patrick Lewis described what was going on January the 6th. He claims to represent military, law enforcement, and intelligence community vets. He has been running security at various events leading up to January the 6th, especially for all these dignitaries that we just described. And it is true that this guy, Philip von Lulsdorf, without the von, he's just known as Philip Lulsdorf, is one of his lieutenants. And here is that photograph you were mentioning inside the so-called war room, where Giuliani was holding court on January the 6th, and maybe January the 5th as well. In there, you can see on the right there, that guy in the big white guy in the white sweatshirt. That is the First Amendment Praetorians Director of Business Affairs, Philip von Lulsdorf. And there you can see how they were able to identify him using the various face technology.
This is Freedom Plaza here.
Yeah, on the right.
Across the street. Across the street.
Fascinating, isn't it? That these guys who were, and I'm going to read you the subpoena that mentioned right now. Just imagine how close they were to Rudy Giuliani and Roger Stone in the command center there, in the war room. I mean, it's certainly beginning to tell me that there's an indication that the First Amendment Praetorians might be the link between the leadership of the insurrection, the Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, and Alex Jones of the world, and also the people who actually committed the crimes and stormed the Capitol. So briefly, let's look at RPL. This is his subpoena. If I can do it briefly, I don't know if I can. What do you guys, just while I try to find this actual copy here, what do you guys think about these connections? They seem pretty volatile and important.
Absolutely. I think, a couple of things that are from a connections perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When you say people are out there chanting Christ is King,
Mm-hmm.
I get that, and that's prayer, and I understand that, but there is way more to just those three words.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Flynn is using those three words, Christ is
one
King.
religion. Yeah.
One religion. That's what they're after. And there's, we can
that is so true, because we're going to play some tape as well that shows exactly that. Yeah.
So the fact that Mike Flynn was being guarded by the First Amendment Praetorian, again, we're talking about going back to the days of Rome, right? These Praetorian guards guarding the elites. So here you have Mike Flynn being guarded by the First Amendment Praetorians. You'll remember a person named Shadow Flynn. He's always around, guarding that person.
Yeah, it's the throwbacks are not, these are not coincidences that they're calling them these names. It's really fascinating, and they've been around. This is what the subpoena says about these guys. So, the investigation and public accounts have revealed credible evidence of your involvement in the First Amendment Praetorian in the events within the scope of Select Committee's inquiry. The First Amendment Praetorian provided security to the Million MAGA March on November 14, 2020, including providing protection to Ali Alexander. You described your coordination with Mr. Alexander as tight at the hip. You later claimed that you provided security for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn at the Jericho March in Washington, D.C. on December 12, 2020, and have, where is it going up here? Claimed to coordinate closely and regularly with Lieutenant General Flynn. You also claimed to coordinate closely with Sidney Powell. That's interesting that name comes up because a tape will just play in a minute from now. You'll see him mention Sidney Powell and why she's so important to this. On January the 4th, 2021, the First Amendment Praetorian Twitter account suggested that violence was imminent. There may be some young National Guard captains facing some very tough choices in the next 48 hours. Pray with every fiber of your being that their choices are wise, just wise and fearless. And you were listed as a speaker on the permit for the Rally to Revival on Freedom Plaza, scheduled for January the 5th, 2021. The permit also stated that 25 members of the First Amendment Praetorian would serve as demonstration marshals on January the 6th, 2021. And on that day at 2:18 p.m., you tweeted, "Today is the day of the true battle begins." At 4:13 p.m., the First Amendment Praetorian Twitter account tweeted, "The cost of truth is pain. The greater the truth, the greater the potential for pain." Boy, is it significant that they were the marshals for the march. These guys who were planning the insurrection.
What time?
Sorry,
was the second one, the 4 something? What was it? What time was that?
4:13.
Well, that was when they were urging them to we the people to keep fighting.
Yeah.
And that's when Trump. They read his tweet again from earlier in the day, and he said Mike Pence didn't have the courage. He changed the tense. Up till that point, let's hope that Mike Pence has the courage, right? And then at 4, right around that time, he says Mike Pence didn't have the courage.
Interesting.
And keep fighting. You have to keep fighting. They were they wanted them to go into that building.
That was the plan. And who were they taking instructions from? Exactly. That's the thing which I keep asking. By the way, Matt Fosa, who's the great composer of the show's music, says online here, the Praetorians assassinated emperors who didn't back the military. It's a really important point about the Praetorians and what their role was. So thank you, Matt, for throwing that into the chat here. We are talking about a very significant connection. When you talk about these people were the marshals, they were the security for the event that preceded the insurrection. In other words, they were connected on a piece of paper, actual proof, actual documentation to the organizers of the event, the Creamers and all these other guys of the world. So you got real evidence there, real indisputable evidence that they were planning on the one hand an insurrection, planning to be violent, planning to do all these things, and on the other hand, they were also being hired as security, or so-called security, for people like Roger Stone, but also for the event itself.
There's a National Park Service permit that names the first Praetorian as being a part of a security. I'll see if I can find that document. I'll tweet it out after the show.
Yeah,
another thing, as I was saying earlier about how the Oath Keepers sort of, they're stepping stones to things, as they do it. First Praetorians do the same thing. This security that they were doing, right? They started out as like this security gig. They're also a surveillance team. They're out there trying to gather information. They were in Portland trying to gather information on Antifa protesters and then sending them to their friends that were still in law enforcement.
Absolutely.
So this is a surveillance organization as well. I mean,
I'm glad you mentioned that,
really
because you also identified earlier on a clip from RPL where he talks about being the intelligence operation, basically the front end intelligence operation for Sidney Powell, who, as we know, is the architect of the big lie. Here's that clip, which just comes from a YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, of RPL's YouTube account. Here he is describing how he's helping Sidney Powell.
Helping them, the Sidney Powell legal team, that she doesn't have the money of the United States government behind her. This is a private enterprise. And so we've been helping their team in multiple respects, whether it be like what we're doing now, what we're talking about with physically protecting the whistleblowers and making sure that they're perfectly okay and will be available to testify when it's needed. We also have had our intelligence team working in a couple of different aspects assisting her team. So our intel team has been processing a lot of OSINT, doing a lot of open source intelligence, a lot of digging, a lot of collating of all these different things that people have been sharing on social media regarding these, different pieces of this election fraud puzzle, whether it be digging into the companies that we know are behind it, Dominion, Smartmatic, Cital, and all of their ownership and all their connections to Venezuela and Iran and China and all these other places.
Oh my God.
Or the people that got physical videos at these different events or at some of the polling locations, and we're uploading it. We've been helping them kind of collate it, bring it to the right place, helping them.
So you see the general drift there. I mean, that's pretty significant.
Somebody's talking. Somebody's flipping on these guys. I mean, I never heard of this guy.
Well, he's been around.
Somebody's
the fascinating thing is
flipping.
he's doing this on YouTube. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
And something else that's just really important that we have to understand too is he's also a Green Beret and he's trained in irregular warfare.
And wrote a book. He wrote several books.
He wrote
a
two
book,
books.
right, yeah.
He wrote two. He's writing a trilogy. It's called The Pact, and in it, the main sort of themes are China, Russia, and Hezbollah, all attacking the United States simultaneously. When in actuality, it really kind of turns out to be China, Russia, and his bullshit. Because he and Flynn and Sidney Powell, there's just so many connective, like you said, Zeb, so much connective tissue that this is definitely a thread worth pulling.
Yeah, I think this is the most significant piece, or one of the most significant things that they were trying to do today by releasing these new subpoena letters today. They are now forcing the media, which has sort of been really lax on this. I must say, I mean, they've not been doing the job that thankfully you guys have been helping us do here. But there's a really important connection here between this organization, the First Amendment Praetorians, and what they were doing for Sidney Powell and Michael Flynn. You remember that big meeting that they had where they were discussing this whole insurrection at the White House? It's, it seems to me that it's the RPL and perhaps other members of the First Amendment Praetorian were chauffeuring Sidney Powell to that meeting, which is the meeting where they discussed the insurrection. So not only are they, acting as driving security for her, they're also their intelligence operation. In other words, they're providing briefs for her. They're explaining to her what the lies might be from the Dominion voting company that they've investigated, which you just spoke about there. You could see that they're much more important than just security and drivers. They drove her there. They briefed her before, probably, and afterwards. What was that briefing like? And who gave them the assignment to brief her? Where are they getting this information from? Who's paying them? Where's this information coming from? Were they being fed information from?
What about Eric Prince? Do you think Eric Prince is in there somewhere?
Eric Prince is into everything, I'm sure.
Everything, right?
I'm still waiting for that man to end up in jail, maybe one of these days. But he must be in here because this is the kind of team that he hangs out with. I mean, these sort of former, Marines and former vets. These are the kind of people he hangs out with. I'm sure we're going to find out that he is there. I've got so much more to do and I want to do it, but I think we're going to have to resume tomorrow because we are just going to run out of time if we continue to try jam this in. So if you guys are okay coming back tomorrow, we can pick up Alex Jones and Stone.
Oh my God, Joe, you're great. I mean, well, both of you together. I'm like, my head is exploding.
I was going to say both of you together.
All
actually,
of those, putting all of those pieces together. I mean, I'm on the front line, but my friend Michael Nigro shot the stack. That great shot of the stack that everybody. He's a wonderful photojournalist. So our jobs are so important. Just being there and pointing our cameras, and then leave it up to the rest of the
Well,
people
no,
to
I think
figure out who they are.
you were one of the first people who pointed out to me, as we looked at that timeline together on the show, Sandy, that we were able to figure out that it was just 19 minutes. It's impossible to penetrate the Capitol in 19 minutes unless you've got some sort of plan. If it's some sort of haphazard, everyone's going to stumble around. You're not going to get inside the entire Capitol on 4 sides in 19 minutes. There's not a chance. So obviously,
and my friends were at. Oh, by the way, Michael Nigro just did a little heart. He's listening to the show.
Okay. Great.
But the fact that this Pretoria guy is going this babbling all this data off. I mean, this is planned for. It couldn't have been just since November, since they lost the election. It had to have been planned further than that, right?
They planned it further, and I think they planned it really badly. And they probably planned it with a lot of informants in their ranks, and without thinking about it, probably had this entire plan, shared widely as we knew about it. Many other people knew about it, and this is in fact what may bring them all down. It certainly should bring them all down.
Kudos to the September to the January 6th committee, because they really know what they're doing. Like Joe said, you know that name?
It's great. It's great. It really is great. Because we've been sitting here in the dark a little bit, doing sort of our own parallel investigation and thinking, is the DOJ even following these people? Or, there's been quite a quiet on the First Amendment Praetorians. It certainly seems the commission, the Jan 6 commission, is doing an incredible job of following all the right things. And tomorrow, I really want to build a case around the money, because the money flow is fantastic. And it's very easy to see how millions of dollars came directly from Donald Trump, or through his campaign at least, to the organizers of this event. That it's not, you don't have to look very hard to see how money flew here. And then China is all over this thing, and we'll break into. We'll talk about that. The irony of it all is, of course, they think
that guy Guo, Bannon's guy with the yacht, the
Moonies and all of that. That's all still coming.
Moonies, oh my God!
It's an incredibly interesting investigation. P. San Fran Girl says we need to boost at Dempsey 2's threads and research. They're extraordinarily important. I couldn't agree more. So everyone who has not yet followed him, follow him, boost him. Does amazingly interesting stuff. And I think I spotted you when you had very few followers, but you've improved a little bit thanks to the narrative.
Great. You're really
and they're very entertaining threads. Very
secret weapon.
Someone's asking who owns the Willard. I think it's owned currently by the Intercontinental Hotel, but it's an interesting piece of property because it's right adjacent to the White House, which would put it in a security cordon, which would be quite. Would certainly make the Secret Service be aware of it very well, and they'd know the layout pretty well of how that place worked. So there's more research to be done on that. Let me see what else people are asking here before we say goodnight. Maybe they could flee, says Matt Fausa again. It says the John Birch Society is back. They even have a Twitter account. Oh, I didn't realize that.
My mother was a member of the John Birch Society.
She was?
In Orange County. Yeah, card carrying.
And now look at you. Look at you now. She'd be so proud of you. Let me see what else we got here.
Oh my God.
Well, I think that's it. I thank everyone for commenting tonight on the chat. I've got it fixed so we can work it more effectively, and we will continue to do so on tomorrow's show.
I had a fantastic time.
We had a great time too. Thank you
so much.
We're going to be back tomorrow. We'll try to do it at 7:00. Hopefully the internet will be friends with me again. And we'll go through the rest of this. We'll go through Alex Jones, Stone, all the money, and everything else. It should be an interesting show. Thank you for being patient tonight. By the way, if you're not a member of the patreon.com/narrative community, please do that as soon as you can, because it's really important that we keep funding this kind of programming. It's gotten prohibitively expensive to keep doing this. Without your support, we only have 1% of this audience watching right now is currently a patron, and we like to keep the programming free for everybody because it's so important. But in order for that to happen, we need some of you to pony up and subscribe or become patrons at patreon.com/narrative. So, if you have time and if you have the money or the inclination, I heartily ask that you do that if you can. And that's the show for tonight. Thank you, Joe Dempsey at Dempsey2. Thank you, Sandy Bacon at Sandy Bacon. I'm Zev Shalev at Zev Shalev. And this is the show for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7. Have a good night, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye. Wow, that was great.
Narrative is made possible by viewers like you. Join today and support truly independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative.